Thanks everyone for coming. And we are really fortunate to have Carolyn Kuebler with us tonight to share some of her work and talk to us a little bit about her work as an editor, which is how I got to know her in the beginning. She is a terrific editor. I think, she's probably most known as an editor because she's done it for so many years. And does such a great job at it. She's been at the New England Review for as the editor in chief for what, 10 years, and before that in various other capacities, I think too. And she is also more recently now the author of the novel Liquid, Fragile, Perishable, which I am a huge fan of. You've heard me talking about it in class, probably too much. It's a really cool book in the way that it balances sort of innovative literary stylistic things that are not intrusive in any way, but are really just sort of deftly deployed. And then it's just got a killer story. So you start reading it and you don't want to stop reading it. And it's also just, wonderful to look at and be immersed in the prose. And it's great. It's a rare thing. So you should all read it. And anyway, I mean, we've been crossing paths for years and years now at the AWP, and so I was sorry that you couldn't come here in person, but better Zoom than nothing at all, I guess. So and she's going to read for us a little bit, and then you guys will have tons of great questions, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you, Greg. And thank you all for letting me be your visiting writer. It's really kind of exciting. I'm used to being a visiting editor, but this is a new experience for me. So thank you. And thank you, Lisa, for setting us up, and Greg, obviously, for inviting me. And I've actually known Greg's writing for about 20 years and love working on those sentences as an editor. It's a real joy. He's actually, I had to look it up because I know that he's been a long time New England Review writer, and his experience with NER actually predates even me. I think he published when he was a mere child in 1991. We've had a long-term relationship with Greg, which has been great. But we've also published another one of your faculty members, Sam Ligon, not as often, but also very enthusiastically. And another member of your community who's a little perhaps more marginal to the community is Kate Lebo. Do you all know her? We've published 3 of her really beautiful essays, and we do have one new one coming out this coming March. So anyway, I've gotten to know these writers all individually, so it was kind of interesting to learn that they were all connected in some way to Eastern Washington, because I learn about writers through their writing and then kind of later find out that they actually know each other, and then even sometimes I meet them and find out that they're actual people, which is what AWP is all about as far as I'm concerned. It's kind of the reason you go there, is to see that these people are actually human, which is pretty cool. So I am sorry I'm not out there. I've never been to Spokane. I'd love to see it sometime, but I think it was the combination of like the thought of flying in the snow from a small town, which you never end up going where you're supposed to go on the same day you're supposed to go. And then just sort of general, I don't know, inauguration malaise, you may call it, or something like that. But anyway, it's been great to meet you all in class today. And, it's pretty cool to see the kids who do the Willow Springs. So actually, we have had a few other people from your program work for the New England Review over the years. As I mentioned today in workshop, there have been some graduates who have gone on to become readers for us. And our readers are really, really important people to any magazine like ours. So we've been really grateful to have them be passed along to us. So like Greg mentioned, I have been an editor for many years. I've edited book reviews for, I'd started Rain Taxi magazine. I worked for Library Journal. I worked for Publishers Weekly. I've been an associate editor and a managing editor and all kinds of editors. And now I'm an editor. But always I've had some of my own writing going. the very least, I feel like I kind of keep the pilot light on, even if you're not like spending a lot of time writing, you've still got that little bit that keeps you going. And my confidence and energy and time on writing has really waxed and waned a lot over the years after I got my MFA. But there's always been something going on, something more often, something that I never finish. But I have always kind of kept at it. And I'm telling you all this because I know that one day you will be graduating from your MFA program and you will probably struggle to keep things going when there are different demands for your jobs and lots of things competing for your time. And sometimes your confidence is really good and sometimes it's really not so good. But there's a lot of ways to be a writer in the world, and everybody is on their own timeline. So just keep that in mind when you leave and you're wondering what happened to that amazing community and what happened to all that focus that you had when you were here at Eastern Washington. So, but I'm going to talk about my novel today, and I'm going to read a little bit from this book as well. This is what it looks like. This book is really the thing that has kept me going for several years, kind of often in the background, but it's really been with me for a very long time. Like, these characters are people that I know really well by now. In fact, I've kind of imagined their life after this book, and what they did during COVID and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really like the place where I was able to put all the things that I was obsessing about, all the questions that I have about life and all of the thoughts and all the different people who have preoccupied me like day after day. So this book was very much a passion project for me, and kind of a sustenance for me as a writer, and also kind of a secret. Like, I didn't really tell very many people that I was writing a novel. In fact, when I told Stephen Donadio, he was the former editor of NER, so I worked with him really closely for a decade. And I told him, I was like, hey, I have a book coming out. You should come to the reading. And he was just like, what? Like, I didn't even know you were writing a novel. And I have another friend actually who was just like, so I see you every week, we walk our dogs together, and like, how come I only found out you were writing a book by like going on the internet? So um, I kept it very much to myself, in part, I think, because I needed to keep this space safe from, outside voices and from practical people and from everyday demands and stuff like that. And especially I had to keep it safe from myself, from the editor, from the critic and the book reviewer and myself. I really had to have this be somewhere where that part of my head could not enter. Because I mean, when you spend so many of your hours like thinking about other people's writing and honestly like having to say no to a lot of people's writing, it's really hard to then make something imperfect and continue working on it yourself. So I ended up having to really develop a habit to write in the morning before that brain started snapping to attention. I used to be able to write late at night, but then it kind of, I needed to get up and work in the morning. So I have this like just extra hour or hour and a half in the morning before working. And it was kind of only once I had like a full-time job and a kid and a house that needed a lot of work that I actually really developed a reliable habit of writing. And that's why it sort of became like my 5 a.m. project. Mostly at that time, I think, is because that's the time when no one else really expects you to be doing anything. Like, there's very few demands on a person at that time of day. So it was like, okay, I'm not ignoring anything that I should be doing, because there isn't anything else that it should be doing at that time of day. So I think also the habit of writing actually really helps me as an editor too. Even if I never published anything, just the struggle to write, I think, really keeps me like honest as an editor. So I can always appreciate what writers had to go through in order to get that work to me, in order to get the work on the page. And so, I think that it's really important for me to have continued writing through all of that time. Hi, Sam. Nice to see you. Is that Kate? I thanked you guys already. Thank you for having me. And I also mentioned that we have an essay of Kate's coming out this March, which is exciting. So it is at the printer. So you'll be getting that in a matter of just a couple of weeks. So anyway, I'm going to get to the book itself now. And just to orient anyone who hasn't read it yet, and also because I'm not going to start on page 1, this novel has a lot of characters. 10 of them are what I would call speaking characters, or like point of view characters, because it's all close third person. It takes place over 1 year in probably about 2007 or 8. And I will mention that Taylor Swift did have a record out by then, just FYI. And it is a place that is certainly based on the real Vermont, but it is an amalgam. The book itself is made up of 101 short chapters, different sections. Yeah, and so while that might seem 2007-ish might seem like a really long time ago, and like the era that we are in now is very different. One of the things that I was actually preoccupied with when I was writing this book was the idea about how even like during times of feeling of crisis and of urgency, you know, whether it's something personal or like a global thing like climate change or whatever, how even during those times people are still going about their lives. You know, they're still they're still worrying about the stupid stuff they worry about. We're still doing our jobs and kind of being just like, yeah, worrying about our stuff. So that was a question that has, and it's just like a feeling that has always been with me, like, when we know this thing is happening, how are we still worrying about this? And yet we do, and yet we continue to go on. So I really love the famous Beckett quote that goes, "You must go on. I can't go on. I'll go on." So anyway, I will begin by reading the epigraphs of this book. I haven't done that before, but otherwise, I don't think anyone ever sees them, right? So I'm going to read those, and then I'm going to read not the entire thing of 5 short sections of the book. And I see a child. Is that Sai? Hello. Okay, so the first epigraph is from the poet Ellen Bryant Voigt. It's from a poem called Storm. And she wrote this entire book called Headwaters, which I adore, without any punctuation, like none. 1 minute, a slender pine, indistinguishable from the others. The next, its trunk, horizontal, still green, the jagged stump, a nest for flickers. 1 minute, high wind and rain, the skies lit up. The next, a bright, few winking stars, the lashing of the brook. And then the second epigraph is from a child ballad. This is a traditional English Scottish ballad. Greg probably knows about these. Child ballad number 216. And I got to know these through a Vermont singer-songwriter named Anais Mitchell, who did these really beautiful recordings of these with a harmonizing genius named Jefferson Hamer. And this is a couple lines from that song. Roaring Clyde, you roar so loud, your streams are wondrous strong. Make me a wrack as I come back, spare me as I'm going. So I'm going to begin with a character named Jean. Jean works at the post office. She's reading a romance novel called Summer's Parade, which she keeps tucked under the counter for when it is slow. Jean still counts the hours as dollars. She wishes it were 5 and she could close, but she can't wish away the dollars. When, oh when, will Summer get her parade? With the door propped, the customers startle her every time. No tinkling bell. Only sometimes a hello, a slap of a mailbox door. It used to be a parade in here on Fridays. I should bring chips and dip, she used to say. Everyone coming for their paychecks, stopping to talk. Now it's just auto pay, auto response, auto deposit, and her job on the line. Nobody wants to pay a clerk to just stand around. The young moms come in sometimes. She remembers those years. Just to have a little adult conversation was enough, even if it's just the same old Jean with no degree. Someone opened a new box today, at least, one of the big ones, and paid cash for a full year. We're expecting some packages, he said. No electric bills, though. Going off the grid. Well, good for you, she wanted to say, if you can afford it. Though he seemed friendly enough. Not like some of the others who come up here thinking they know better how to live. You don't want to be the town gossip, Don will say when she tells him about the Cowper family paying cash, here to stay now. Like when she tells him about the final notices and the Soldier of Fortune subscriptions, the heavy packages for cider sabot stamped fragile, liquid. She sees what she sees. There's just nothing you can do about it. Just don't talk so much, Don says. But when Len comes in, Jean can't help herself. Leonard LaRock, she says, same way as she always does. How's the day treating you, sir? Len is always good for a smile. He comes up to the counter with his envelopes, his catalogs, and she catches a whiff of Tide and River, both. You could bottle that up and call it bachelor cologne. Can't complain, he says. Day like this, worth a year of Saturdays. Everyone's out today, Jean says, or should be. That's the conversation here these days. In, out, weather, hello, a smile if she's lucky. Jean reaches around in her mind for something to say, but it's like an empty closet in there. Fishing good today? Jean doesn't care about fishing, but it's talk, and it moves from fish to dawn to the weather again. Nell Castleton out walking on the road with a pack. Like a hobo, Jean says, though she knows the Castletons always had doctors in the family. She hasn't had a delivery all winter, come to think of it, Len says, though Rudy LeBeau's been burning double. People who deliver propane, they know things too. You can't help but know things. In a town like this, someone's always looking out for you. Or talking smack about you, is how her sons would say it, is why they moved up to Kingsbury as soon as they had a chance. Well, have a good rest of your day, Jeannie. And don't forget to tell Dawn about the brook trout up there. They're fat. They could use some exercise. I'm going to move on to a character named Nell. She is Nell Castleton walking by in the backpack. She lives up in a camp, an old camp up in the woods in the mountains by herself. Jean awoke to warmth and birdsong, but the moment she stepped outside her door, the peace of the morning dissolved. She's picking her way up and up now through the trees, on a mission. Nell has to find that smell and make it stop. It will go away, she said each morning this week, closing the windows. But it has only gotten worse. How a morning that began with so much birdsong has turned to this. Stalking, creeping, just follow your nose. The smell is weaker, then strong again on the cool, wet air. The scrip, scrip, scrip of a cardinal, all that's left of the morning now. A crow in the distance, cawing its warning. You're too sensitive, Christine tells her. Thicken your skin. But even her younger sister, so sensible, so pragmatic, would not ignore the lingering smell of sewage. Nell did her best to tune out the banging on the new house on the ridge all winter, the trucks rumbling up the mountain with their sheets of glass, but she can't ignore this. She steps through the leaf litter, the fiddleheads unfurling, picking her way up through the trees. There's a strand of Dutchman's breeches. She nearly crushed them, the tiny white blossoms hanging from a line. How they used to spend hours looking for flowers like that. The trout lilies first, then the trillium, every day when finally it was spring. Or maybe it wasn't hours and days, maybe it really was just that once. She and Laura after school, with nothing else to do. The spring woods are so fragile. Her own equilibrium, too, seems to get more fragile. Another headache is coming already, though it's only been a few weeks since the last. It's just glistening on the edges now, but it's coming. The stench is getting stronger as she goes, too. The smell of sulfur and shit and something else, wet and stagnant. It's not coming from the old sugar shack, which marks the beginning of the LeBeau land, posted and private. It's not coming from the pile of metal and glass, two old cars rusted into one. Her heart beats fast with exertion from the climb, with fear, too. She has always tried to avoid these people, bearded men with their loud machines, and women who don't look up. Now, the third section is a guy named Jim. He is a journalist, kind of an environmental writer. And as mentioned, this book takes place around 2007-ish, so some things have changed in his field since then. But this is he. Jim's drive to the airport took 55 minutes, more than twice the distance, but less time than it would have taken him from Manhattan to JFK on the subway. They just moved to Vermont. I forgot to mention that part, from New York City. 2-lane roads and farms on either side, then forest, then finally some traffic lights as he got closer. He wants to tell someone, to take a picture. Can you believe this is my trip to the airport? Jim's going to fly less now, and he's going to make the most of every flight. He'll give the conference keynote in Denver, but also tack on a trip to see his parents in the suburbs. Not that it's much of a consolation once you figure out the gallon per second of fuel the plane burns. But you can't change everything all at once. He finds a seat in a rocking chair by the windows near his gate. It's not comfortable. That's probably not the point. It's just part of the branding. Hey, you're in Vermont. Relax. There's nearly an hour till boarding, so he might as well settle in and get some work done. He plugs in the laptop, and already he's got more than 30 new emails since yesterday. 3 of the emails are from his agent, and they're all about bees. She's taken an interest in hooking him up with a new project. This is going to be big, she says. The bees are losing their way, and nobody knows why. In Europe, Brazil, California. And look at this, the largest apiary in the county, right down the road from your new house. Jim clicks through to the site, Honey in the Rock. Or he tries to. It gets stuck loading. Even at the airport, the internet is so slow. When the site finally opens, his screen fills with bees crawling on a comb. There's a picture of the beekeeping family. Mom, dad, and daughter, 2 blonde braids running down her shoulders, the epitome of wholesome country living. But what's with the Bible verses? He should have guessed with a name like Honey in the Rock. But I would feed you with the finest of wheat, and with honey from the rock I would satisfy you. Jim has worked with religious people before. People who see the wrath of God everywhere, or who think they can do what they want because it's in God's name. He didn't expect them here in Vermont, though, despite all of the pretty little churches and the pretty little towns. The last 2 characters are a little bit younger. This one is Cyrus LeBeau. He's about 21, and he lives with his dad up in the mountains near to Nell. Are you sick, kid? I never see you lying around till noon. Dad's up, drinking his shit coffee. People are shouting at each other on the TV. The audience is laughing. Cyrus needs to get out of here. It probably really is noon from the look of things with the sun coming in. It hurts even to keep his eyes open. He's itchy all over. Like pot, but legal, they said. Supposed to be just a little smoke, a little high, and then everything just gets back to normal. But it wasn't good then, and now it's only bad. 12 hours later, maybe more, his brain hurts. His throat, not so great either. Z8 times 1, Z8 times 2 times 3. He hasn't even tested past 1. He must have been out there for hours last night. Mosquitoes eating him alive, chomping on his arms, his face, too. You look like shit, the old man says. Must have been a pretty good night. The bats came out, the stars came out, and it just got worse. He thought he would die, wanted to die. What a disaster. $80 and nothing but a headache to show for it, plus all those hours cleaning the shack and tracking down the supplies. He could have put in the wrong amount of any of those things. How could he know? He can't even find the page online anymore. It's like it never existed. If he died out there, only Ewi would have found him. He's the only one who goes out there. Maybe the raccoons, the coyotes. They would tear me to shreds, eat my heart out. It was nothing a halfway decent chemistry major couldn't do. 8 chemicals and some cheap tobacco. Cyrus is more than halfway decent, isn't he? Dad doesn't even put on a shirt. If Cyrus was skinny like that, with a gut like that, he would put on a shirt at least. You got work today? Dad says. No, I've got nothing today, taking the day off. Killing off his brain cells more like 1 by 1, 2 by 2. What if the next one is worse? Well, good for you, kid. Take it easy, he says. Just don't get used to it. You'll just get old, like me. More laughter from the TV, more shouting, some kind of news show maybe. But you're too smart to get old, aren't you? Maybe he'll just jump in the river today, clear it all out, go to Circle Current and see who's hanging around, just be a normal person again, a normal guy taking the day off, maybe seeing some girls. And then he'll go crawling back to Shaw's, back to working full time because somebody's got to pay. He's seen them piling up in the kitchen. Electric, propane, everything on final notice. Shaw's would take him too. I'd hire you in a heartbeat, Carol said. Good luck, she said, when he clocked out for the last time. Such a show he made of putting his apron on the bonfire that night. What are you going to do next, Cyrus? Not that anyone really cared. It's too late for the lawn crews now, though. Too late for the road crews. He had a good idea, such a good idea, and it was summer coming. Things were about to go his way. But you can't sell people on a burn and a headache. Or you could sell it once or twice, but they'd come back for him. Cyrus pours his coffee, and he walks out the back door, back to his sugar shack, scene of the crime, all cleaned up, no place to go. The jobs out there are always the same, looking for someone to join our team. He should have gone to college. Those kids, they think they work so hard, taking the hard classes, getting the grades, but they don't know work, not really. That's all just self-improvement. Okay, one more person. This last character is Sophie. She's one of a trio of teenage girlfriends in the book. And her friend Amber has recently stopped by the home of Willoughby Cowper, whose dad is Jim. He wasn't home, but his mom was there. And she invited Amber in and offered her some iced tea with agave syrup for sweetener. And that does become relevant. So anyway, here is Sophie. Sophie is walking home, walking a straight line down the sidewalk under streetlights. Bats swoop under the lights, swooping and whirling. Sophie likes bats. And Sophie is not weaving, is she? She's only a little bit drunk. I am only just a tiny bit drunk, she says. Not like Amber, not like Honey, the two of them laughing like hyenas, stuck to that sticky picnic table all night. Agave, Amber said. She told the story so many times. Would you like some of this agave syrup? I'm afraid the tea is quite bitter. What, is his mother British or something? Sophie said that. She said other things too, like, why would she be trying to impress you? Sophie didn't mean to sound mean. I mean, I wasn't talking just about you, Amber, she said. I'm the local riffraff too. But Amber got sulky. I'm sure she just took my number and threw it away. That's why he never called me. Let's have a toast to the local riffraff, Honey said. Honey was just trying to make it better. Why was it so funny then when she knocked Amber's purse on the ground? Change and pens and tampons under the table in the dirt. They laughed and laughed, and Sophie wanted to laugh too, but it wasn't funny. It wasn't funny when Honey picked up the dirty popsicle stick either. Is this yours? She was on her knees under the table. Is this yours? And Amber couldn't stop laughing. Sophie might be a little bit drunk, but not like those two. If she hadn't been late getting there, if she'd been there on time, maybe she might have been part of the fun too. But she was late. I had to practice first, or my parents wouldn't let me go, she told them. The fact is, she got caught up and forgot the time. Her parents are too busy to notice if she practices the guitar. She only wanted her friends to forgive her for being late. Poor Sophie, whose parents make her practice. But Amber said, I bet Taylor Swift doesn't have to practice. And Honey said, who's Taylor Swift? And they went on laughing like that, the funniest girls in the world. Sophie drank just enough to blur the edges, vodka and ginger ale. She's pretty sure her parents won't even notice. Her sneakers make no sound on the sidewalk. She's walking straight as straight can be. A car slows down, then passes, on its way up Mountain Road. Bats whirl in and out of the trees. They whirl and swoop. I'm a girl who likes bats, Sophie says. Who wouldn't love a girl who likes bats? Willoughby will. Willoughby would. Will must love a girl who likes bats, a girl who plays the guitar. I will show him the bats and play the guitar for him. Oh my God, my mom will think she died and went to heaven when I bring him home, Amber said. Oh my God, she'll totally be thinking jackpot. How Amber ruins everything. How Amber thinks everything is funny, a party. We'll show him where the parties are, is what she said. As if a kid from New York City would care about their parties. We are the party, Honey said. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you for all of the silent applauses. It's very sweet. So I'm happy to talk or answer any questions or whatever it is you'd all like to say. Thank you for listening.
I do have a question. Could you talk? I didn't realize you had started Rain Taxi. Could you talk a little bit about that? Like how, why you did it, how you did it, and why you handed it off?
Sure. Why I did it was because I thought, wow, I really want to have a job and I want to have one of those publishers that pays you and I want to make some money, which never happened, of course. But I was working in publishing at Dalkey Archive Press, and I love, love, love their books. But my job was to get them reviewed, and it was very difficult to get them reviewed. In fact, I found it really difficult to get any books, any book reviews published for any books I really loved. And I found that often when a newspaper would assign me a book, it was a book I didn't really like, and it was usually a major publisher. So we thought Rain Taxi would be a really great way to be able to review all of the books that we cared about and all the small press books out in the world. And it was before Amazon and before the internet was like where everybody put all of their book reviews all the time. So it's like 1995. And yeah, so we really just wanted to have a place to review the books we liked, and we thought it would be a really great business. turned out to be a great place to review books, but not a great business. So after, I think I was there for like, I was working in a bookstore and doing Rain Taxi for 3.5 years. And then after like, I think year 3, I finally got paid, and I got paid $2,000. And I was like, this is not going to work. I might as well go and get an MFA if I'm not going to get paid. So we handed it off to Eric, who is crazy enough to still be doing it now, many years later.
Yeah, great. No, it's been around a long time. I've always loved that. Thank you for doing it.
Yeah. Well, thank Eric for keeping it going, really.
I wanted to ask about your novel writing process, because you mentioned like keeping it private, and like I think that's so interesting and cool. And then also, I feel like I'm hearing different things the more I talk to people about like some writers who write really fast and want to like write more and then pare it all down, or writers who want to really take their time and go like sentence by sentence and just keep it all. So I wanted to ask about what your process is and what you keep and how much never sees
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah, I'm kind of both of those things. I was talking to Greg about this a little bit earlier, like how did you come to this particular form? And I had tried writing, there's a story here that I wanted to write, and there are people here that I wanted to write, and there are voices. And I tried writing it from a lot of different ways. So I tried writing it with in the first person and with long windy sentences and paragraphs and things. But then when I finally just sort of settled down and was like, I need to just write this sentence by sentence. Like I'm only allowed to write one sentence, and then I have to stop and breathe. And then I'll write another one, because I would pile them on too much and then have to start over. And it was just, I was going crazy with that. I think that I tend to, I was writing maybe too sloppily, just like, I'm just going to get it all, I'm going to get it all out. And then I'm going to tidy it up. But that didn't really work. What I ended up doing was like, writing, okay, this is where I'm going to start. And I would write 1 or 2 sentences and kind of let it sit, and then write a little bit more, so that I wouldn't end up with that big pile that I needed to clean up, so that each thing that I put down, I would have decided I wanted before I put it there. But that wasn't really until I knew the story and the characters really, really well. So I wasn't really making them up at this point anymore. I had already finished making them up, and this was really just writing them. And then so later on, and as the book progressed and in this particular form, I would go, well, what do I want this section to be? And then I would kind of write it as very freely, and then I would almost like just pull from that. This is the only parts I actually need. I don't need all the rest of that stuff. And there are some sections in the book that I probably wrote like there are a couple sections that I wrote differently when I first came up with the idea for the book, and they're still in there. So some of these sections, just like I rewrote them, but they're still there. So there's a couple of scenes that have been with me forever, and they're still in this book, even though they're not in their original form anymore.
Thank you.
I have to ask,
Oh, sorry, Greg.
which scenes were, I just want to know which scenes are they, unless it's a spoiler.
No, so a couple of the scenes. So there's a scene with the 3 girls in the river where the one of them jumps in or slides off the rock, and it's in May, and so you're not really supposed to go swimming. So there's that scene on the rocks. That place by the rocks is really important to me. It's like based on a real place that I love and think about all the time. Jean in the post office, not necessarily the scene that I read, but Jean in the post office, day 1, was there. And Nell, really the opening scene of the book. I had that scene in a different way for a long time. And then the others that are spoilers that I won't mention.
I really love that scene on the rocks in the swimming in May. it's one of my favorites. But that was not my
Oh,
question.
good.
I just, yeah, loved it. I was wondering, you mentioned that this is kind of like not a real place, but very based in Vermont. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, like that process of navigating wanting to have like these really real, tangible, like related things that like someone of New England, of Vermont will recognize and know, like Shaw's, love that.
Yeah.
But then also having this be a place that is invented.
Hmm. Well, I honestly just didn't want to have a college. And Middlebury, where I live, is a college town. Um, I don't know why. I think because I spend so much time around college related people that it's in my writing that I actually get to get away from them, um, and get away from writers. Ironically enough, writing is a place to get away from that stuff. And I guess like I didn't want to have anything be recognizable and factual and fact checkable as well. Like the post office, I actually was like walking down the street and this woman was like, "Did you write that book?" And I was like, yeah. And then she goes, "That postmistress, I know her. She's in Ferrisburg." And I was just like, no, because I've never even been to the post office in Ferrisburg. So I was like, okay, well, that's good because I can't be accused of like, I don't know, using a real person. But yeah, I didn't want to have anything be 100% real. And there are just like aspects of different communities around the state that I wanted to have that just they're not all in the same place, and just kind of stuck them together. Are you from New England?
Yeah, I'm from Maine.
Oh,
coastal.
right. Yeah.
It's, yeah, it's been a lot of fun to read your book and have these ties that I have a lot of missing and longing for that part of the world. Yeah, thank you though. That's really
Yeah.
interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carolyn, I was actually going to ask kind of something like kind of based off of the question about Vermont there, because spent 2 years living in Colchester as like a child, and
Oh,
like
yeah.
like read it, like just hearing you kind of read your stuff in like a lot of ways, like rural Vermont is kind of an interesting place to me because it kind of reminds me of like the rural South in a way, and so like I was wondering if as you were kind of writing about this specific town, you ever took any influences from that? And then also like just going back to when we were in workshop today, like we were talking about like what's kind of propelling this piece forward. And so like I was wondering, like at the beginning of writing this, did you notice something specific that was like propelling this forward that kind of had you like, I want to pursue this? So yeah, so kind of a two-part question there, I guess. But
Yeah. So the first part about, were you asking like, have I been to the rural South, and was the rural South a part of it, or?
I guess just like it's interesting, like rural Vermont to me is like it kind of has just shares a lot in common with the rural South
Mhm.
in kind of a way. And I was wondering if like you took any influence from like any Southern writers
Oh,
in
yeah.
working on that at all, or like is there anyone that maybe you did kind of.
Yeah, not consciously. I guess I definitely not thinking about the rural South, but I think it's like more like maybe mountainous, sort of like mountain communities, where they're a little bit remote and takes people a little while for you know popular culture to make its way through, especially in the fashion department. But I haven't spent time in the rural South, and I don't think I was even thinking about Southern writers, though you never know which of your influences you've swallowed up and put into your work. Certainly not consciously in that regard. Um, the other question was like sort of what maybe the driving story or the driving force of this is. And there's a couple of different things. One, I think, is, I would say, the character of Nell, who's this woman who lives by herself, and really her whole objective in life is sort of to do the least amount of harm, to not cause any trouble and to not burn too much fuel, and other ways of causing trouble, and is a little bit disconnected, doesn't really have a real job, is never really have never really like achieved anything in life that is measurable. And I mean, I guess I've known people like that, and I've always been interested in sort of like a way of living really by your own moral compass and your own rules, rather than really trying to live up to what society expects you to do. She comes from a family of doctors and very educated people, but just did not pursue that for herself, maybe in part because of the migraine headaches. There's a number of reasons. So there's like a sort of a character drive there, but then there's in the center of the book is a story that I won't really I don't want to give it away because I think that would kind of wreck it for people who haven't read it yet. But that was definitely a driving force, something that happened around here, and that sense of like the entire community being affected by something. So like these people are not, otherwise not friends. They're not in the same social circles. They're not the same age, but there are certain things, there's the weather for one thing that everybody is connected to, moved by and affected by, especially in a place like in a rural place where the weather really matters a lot. So there's that. But then there are just certain events that happen and certain things that occur in a community that sort of pulls everybody, that everyone is in some way threaded together by. So that's kind of I'm not from a rural place, so having been here, I've really sort of noticed these things that are very different from the place where I grew up and have been fascinated by them.
Carolyn, it's Sam. With such a large cast, can you talk about how that cast developed, like how it possibly expanded and accumulated, and then if there was a time maybe when it started to contract?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did both. There's a couple of characters who I'd cut, and I wanted to cut more, but then I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I thought it was pretty much maxed out with 10 people being point of view characters. And I think some of them, like I was saying, the town is kind of an amalgam. I think some of the people are as well. So you'll have like one, say Cyrus and Eli, where there's a whole ton of those people. Then there's even more brothers, but I cut some of them. I don't have all of the teenagers speak. There's really only one who has her own voicing sections. And I think like as the book grew and accumulated and became itself, I did start to bring it back a little bit in terms of the number of people and the number of things that happened and the number of points of view. So, yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question, but there were more. And now there are fewer because I really felt like I could not handle more. And it's already a lot to ask the reader to keep track of this many people. And I worked very hard to put breadcrumbs along the way so that it like wouldn't be too hard to keep track of who was who. But yeah, it's funny when you're trying to write the story of a town to like not have an endless number of characters.
I'm sure the voice has subtle changes from perspective to perspective. Was that difficult, or how did you manage that? Because I know we're in third, it's multiple thirds. How did you handle voice? Because I could hear the difference in the voices, yet I could also feel a consistency. Was that a struggle?
I feel like I just kind of knew it was almost like this trying to get inside the skin of the people, even though it's in third. It was really trying to to be in them. So like once I knew who the character was, it wasn't hard. So yeah, it was almost like really just sort of obsessively thinking about what would it be like to be in this place, like in this, I mean, that's what you do, right? When you're writing a character, is you kind of like put yourself in their place, and try to see through their eyes and what would they be thinking about. And I think the struggle was almost more with like, not not having too much. Like I feel like there's a lot going on, but I was really paring it back all the time, like not wanting to have too many examples of the same things. Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes I worried that the people sounded too similar, but I just let them be.
I've been interested in the way Greg has talked about the novel and then how you described writing those different sections. And I was wondering how you decided to order them. Is it chronologically?
Mm.
Is it by feel or some other sort of resonance you're trying to create between the fragments?
Yeah, that was really a fun part, actually, was the ordering of things. And I did change things around a number of times. I mean, it's generally chronological. Yeah. So it's because it goes from it's 1 year. So it starts in May and it ends in May. And so everything does follow along that the timeline. But there's still so much within that. Like, well, this person, then that person, then this person, then that person. And it's really trying to create a rhythm and also to make it so that you can remember, you can follow the threads through the different people and sort of follow a story through them. And variety. Like I didn't want to go like this, like all in order all the time. And then there'd be some points where I would be like, wow, we really haven't heard from Cyrus in a long time. And then I would kind of go, well, where is he? And then write him in there and be like, well, that actually doesn't fit there. So, oh, and if I put that there, then that, this plot item doesn't fit anymore. So there was a lot of like little minute fixing of things once I did reorder the people, because you'd be like, oh no, he can't have done that already because this didn't happen yet. So there was a lot of like finessing of things when you have separate movable parts that you can rearrange to your liking. Then you kind of have to make sure it all still fits chronologically. So it was a real puzzle for sure. And I had like many lists and not quite an outline, but like a chunks. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of pieces.
Kind of related to Brian's question, I was wondering if there were other writers that you were looking at who'd done something. I've never read anything like this before, and it was really cool. And I know you mentioned in the epigraph this without any punctuation, but I was wondering if there's like any more sources you were kind of using as like a North Star.
Yeah. So I mentioned this one to Greg earlier as well. There's a writer named David Markson who is a very intellectual sort of writer, but he writes in these very short paragraphs with a lot of white space. So I knew it was like okay. Somebody had done it. I love his books, and there was something that just felt like they're when I don't know, when I first just sort of discovered them, I just was so thrilled. Like there was something there for me, and I didn't really know what it was. I don't write anything like David Markson in terms of content or even, yeah, he's very urban and very much about artists. He writes about artists and thinking about artists. And it's in a similar paragraph style. So there was that. And there's a book by Catherine Davis called The Thin Place, which is a little bit of a North Star for me because it's also in a New England town. She's a writer who I just love. She's so imaginative and strange. My books really aren't like her. It's not really like hers either, but there's a different characters and it's around a place. And there's some yeah, I guess it's just sort of like different parts of a rural community that um, figure in ways that are fairly unusual. That book has really meant a lot to me too. There's another book that I read after I wrote my book that you would maybe think should have been one of my books, but that I really love. It's called Reservoir 13 by John McGregor. He's a British writer, and it's a really cool book. I don't know. I did read it after I wrote my book, but it kind of made me be like, oh, I should have wrote it like that, you know? Like it's one of the problems with being an editor is that I read so many things I really like and I'm just like, oh, I want to be that writer. Oh no, I want to write like that. And so I feel like it took me a really long time to write my own book because I was very much looking at other people's books all the time and really wanting to be this writer, this writer, this writer, this writer, or that writer, and not really wanting necessarily to be the writer that I was, you know. And I think that I eventually had to just be like, you know, nope, you got what you got. So that's what you're going to do.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
You also, did you show them what the page looks like? Because it looks so different. Looks like, can you see it? You look on the page and when I first picked it up in the bookstore, I was like, what?
What is she doing?
And, yeah, what is she doing? And then I started reading it. I was like, it's just like any other novel, really, in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Really.
I don't have it. I haven't read it. Are the sections numbered? Are they named? Are they with just white space after each section?
Well, there's a variety of different sections. So there are some I don't actually even mostly there's just like I think what Greg was referring to was sort of a lot of white space in between the sections. So in between the sentences. So there's like this very short
Right.
paragraphs. But then there's just a little star and then you move on to the next character. And then there's just a little
Okay.
star and you move on to the next character. And there are like then bigger chapters that are numbered. But they're not named anything. So that's just sort of more to show a bigger break in time and to give you a little bit of a breather.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I played with naming things and labeling things and ultimately decided against it.
Well, that was where I was headed, is to label or not to label. So
Yeah.
helps.
The first chapter, you're a little bit like, what's going on? Who's what? Why am I with this person? Why am I with the next? And then you realize, no, they all come back.
Mm-hmm.
And with each chapter, they keep coming back, and there starts to be like a pattern and a resonance. And then there's a limit. Like you don't after chapter 1, you don't meet anybody new.
Right.
I'm pretty sure.
There's no, you don't add it. I don't add anybody after.
Yeah.
Once they're all in, they're all in. There's no new
So
people.
yeah.
So I guess that helps, right? I mean, it doesn't just
It's
keep
really-
adding. I don't just keep adding.
That would be too much. That would be too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was towards the end there and my editor was like, "Do you think like you should, I don't know, make it clearer who like do you want to should we label them or do you want to put like," and I was like, "No, I really don't want to. But what about putting like a thing at the beginning, like where they put all the names and who's connected to who, or like a little, like a little map or whatever." But then I was like, it's really not that complicated. Like it would just be like a fake Russian novel. I don't it's not that complicated. That would look a little pretentious, I thought, like just, I don't know. So, but we did talk about that a little bit, like, maybe there's a way you could just make it easier for people. And then he was like, no, it just takes a little patience, just a little bit of patience. Which, all books do.
I was going to ask what the experience was like working with an editor, as being an editor yourself, just what that whole dynamic was like.
Yeah. Well, my editor didn't really edit very much. I had a really good friend edit. I mean, she was the one. I would say that my friend was really my editor. She read the first finished draft of the whole thing and suggested a ton of cuts. So I cut a couple thousand words there, and then I got this agent, and then she wanted me to add stuff, so I added stuff and rewrote some things, and then got back to, it's just, so there were a lot of different phases in that way. But once it got to the publisher and the publisher was like, yes, we want to publish this, they gave me a light copy edit, and that was really it. So, which is fine because I was done editing it by then. It's like it has been through it already. And my husband is like a professional proofreader, copy editor, and he went over it. So there really wasn't even that much. Mostly what the copy editor did was just like say, when you quote these different, you have this Christian beekeeper guy, and he quotes different Bible things sometimes. And he's like, sometimes you're quoting from the New American blah blah, and sometimes you're quoting from the King James, and sometimes you're quoting from this, and you might want to make it consistent. I was like, okay. Fine, happy to do that. Yeah, so mostly like stuff like that. But friends are good editors. They can be.
Any other last question? Going once, going twice. Well, thanks. Thanks everyone for coming out, and thanks Carolyn for staying up until, what is it, it's almost midnight there, right? So
It's only 11 something, but yeah, I'm an early bird, like I said, so it feels, I had to have chocolate. I had like extra chocolate.
that's always a good thing.
Yeah. So I can stay up. No, thank you all for listening and for letting me share my book with you and sharing your own writing with me and showing up on a Friday night Zoom to further your literary careers. Yeah, the door's open. You know how to find me. Greg can give you my email if you ever have anything you want to get in touch about. Happy to talk about stuff anytime. You're like breaking up to me. Is anyone?
I can't hear him.
Is that better? Is that better?
Yeah. There you go.
So, but are you looking for people to read?
Not right now, but at the end of the summer, we might. In August.
Well, let me know. Some people might be interested in that.
Yeah, it's cool.
Reading slush, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. My managing editor doesn't want us to call it that, though. She's like, we should just call it the queue.
Okay.
So I'm trying to not call it that anymore.
I like it.
We're calling it the queue.
Not to be confused with X.
Oh, God. That's right. We're not on there anymore.
Nope.
No,
right.
we don't either.
You're not either? Good.
No.
Yeah. It's a cesspool.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a great night.
Great reading.